Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 30, which is called Confrontation. And yeah, this was another good chapter. Usual issues of just the monthly format isn't the best. It feels like this was a pretty eventful chapter, but at the same time you look back on it and it's like, oh no, they just took their time telling a couple of interesting scenes. But in the grand scheme of things, it is a interesting, intriguing chapter. So we see Kashin Koji spying on Boruto and Kawaki. He immediately is shocked and sort of, I suppose, holds off on doing anything overly serious because he's very surprised to see that the way Kawaki's being like held in the village is that he's allowed a lot of just free reign. He's just kind of living with Naruto and there's no massive restrictions on him, which actually get in the way of the way that Kashin Koji was planning on actually, I suppose, talking to or spying on Kawaki. But he is interested to still, I suppose, analyze what's going on here. That's what you're meant to take between, I suppose, the difference between Kashin Koji and in what Delta does in this chapter. He's willing to wait and be patient and just kind of analyze. Delta gets furious and kind of rushes in and could put things at risk because of, I suppose, what is kind of revealed in the middle of this chapter. So we see that, of course, Kawaki is trying to glue the vase that he shattered back together. We actually see that Himawari is the one talking to him, and that she is just like, you don't have to do this. You already got me a new vase, and that's enough. Thanks. And Boruto, he hears this, so he's kind of like, because Himawari's kind of happy enough with it, I suppose he's happy enough with it. But the dynamic between Boruto and Kawaki is just this really interesting one where they're both utterly unwilling to let down that kind of facade of being really aggressive towards each other. Because it's almost like the first one to properly take that down loses in both of their minds. So they're still both, like insulting each other in nearly every sentence, even though there is now, I suppose, a respect and also an understanding between them now based on what's happened in the last few chapters. But I think the dynamic between these two is actually developing into something pretty nice and unique. So I'm interested to see how much longer we get to do all of this. Like, is Kawaki going to be taken away in a couple of chapters, or is he really sticking around for like a long time and then maybe something happens? That's what I'm kind of intrigued to see. So, Boruto sort of insults him, are you going to give up about this just because you think it's hard? And then he basically says, we need to do some more training with the karma mark. I want to get to know how to actually use it properly. So Kawaki agrees to this, and we pretty much cut immediately outside. Naruto's involved in this as well. He's overseeing it. Himawari's there to watch on also. And basically they just have a sparring match, basically. Because Kawaki is like, the best way to awaken it for you who doesn't have control over it is to, basically use it in actual combat. And they immediately both get their karma mark going because we know, I think from last chapter, when Kawaki activates his, it sort of like forces Boruto's out. So they start it like that. Kawaki goes immediately into his sort of like arm body transformation because of the scientific ninja tools. This is where Himawari learns about it for the first time. So she's a bit shocked by this, but Naruto explains it fairly casually to her that that's what it is. She actually is kind of cheering on both of them, which I actually quite like. I like that they've incorporated the fact that Himawari actually likes Kawaki. And in a way, there's this kind of just connection of like, he can't be rude to her in a way like that. That's sort of something that they've kind of established, that as much as he has this really rude personality, he can't bring himself to be overly rude to her. So there's this sort of interesting like little connection there. I don't know how much they're going to like really emphasize it, but it's been present there so far. In terms of, I've liked how Himawari's been like incorporated into these chapters. In terms of, here's like basically the person kind of Boruto cares about the most, and then Kawaki actually, is trying to do all of this stuff for her. The key events in the fight happen when Kawaki fires some energy blasts at Boruto and basically says, block this, absorb it in the way you did before. But Boruto, of course, doesn't really know exactly how he did that previously. He just kind of reacted on instinct. So he actually damages his hand. It's not a really brutal attack, but he's like, that hurts, and it's like his hand is all burned, and he didn't really absorb any of it. So that's a kind of a little interesting moment to see that it just kind of didn't end up working out. And so they kind of bring the fight to a stop at this point. Naruto's just like, okay, that's enough. They do the whole Seal of Reconciliation, which was, I think, set up from last chapter, because, yeah, we saw Naruto and Boruto spar. And so Kawaki and Boruto just do it. But the second they touch, because they still have their karma marks activated, they both sense something happens, but I suppose what we learn is that Boruto sees a vision of Momoshiki Otsutsuki. He asks Kawaki, and it's still a little vague, but I think Boruto's reaction says that he feels that Kawaki didn't see Momoshiki. Kashin Koji is, of course, watching all of this and notes that in the aftermath of this, Boruto's hand immediately heals and questions what exactly happened here. Was it the karma, or was it something inherent to Boruto? And then he makes probably one of the most interesting statements in the chapter, the statement of, does he have the same power as Jigen? So we know Jigen has the karma mark, and that obviously the difference between the origins of the different characters' karma marks is kind of becoming key here. We know Boruto got his by killing Momoshiki Otsutsuki, and that's why he has the mark. That's why sort of Momoshiki is sort of, his fate is sort of tied to Boruto. They're linked together in a way. Kawaki got his by sort of it being sort of like implanted in him, like an aspect of Jigen's power was implanted within Kawaki, so he didn't get it in, I suppose, the normal way. And then Jigen, we actually don't know how he got his mark from. And then I think we also need to remember that, like, when we were first introduced to the Kara organization, it was a lot about the symbols of, like, the karma mark in the background, and we were, I think initially, like, speculation was that, like, did they all have their own karma mark? Are they all about that sort of stuff? But we don't know for sure. But I think that's an interesting reveal, that they're making it clear now that, okay, Jigen is going to be the one who potentially has the other original karma mark, which, based on what we know right now, would potentially suggest, has he also killed or encountered an Otsutsuki, and that's where he got his power from. And so all of a sudden everything changes from, there's only maybe so much that can happen between Boruto's karma mark and Kawaki's karma mark, but imagine what could happen between the karma mark of Jigen and Boruto. So this may actually shift the story a little bit to, like, do they need to capture Boruto and introduce him to Jigen to make something happen or not? So yeah, that's kind of most of, like, the first aspect of the chapter. We cut pretty much over to Delta at this point, and she is furious because Kashin Koji ran off, and she just decides, I'm going in anyway, I don't care if I trip the alarm. She first does send her drone in, which I suppose basically reveals to us that Delta also has the whole scientific ninja tool aspect going on with her body, in that the drone literally comes out of her back. And it's not just on her back, it, like, is a part of her back. Then she flies by basically transforming her feet. Like, she's wearing kind of high heels, so, like, the gap between the heel bit and the rest of the foot kind of just splits open completely, and it's like a booster rocket. And she flies in, and immediately we see Ino senses her. She warns Naruto, and Naruto just really confidently says, I'll defeat them here on my own. Like, don't alert anyone to this fact. He tries to tell Boruto to get away with Himawari, but there's not enough time. She arrives, and we end the chapter with the setup that it seems like Naruto and Delta are going to fight, and Naruto seems like he's going to go all out. He's probably going to have to, because Delta's probably going to be deceptively strong, and he has to protect Boruto, Kawaki, and Himawari, I suppose, most importantly. This is where, I suppose, immediately for next chapter, the speculation and the discussion is going to be around, how do they do this fight? Because look, Delta's an unknown, but Naruto should effectively be one of, if not the most powerful characters in the series. That's what we know. And unless they do something to sort of limit his power here, he should be winning this fight without too much of a problem. And I think they've given a sort of path for that to happen with the idea that Kashin Koji is still there. So, like, Delta can be defeated and, like, Kara still have someone there. So, it depends on really what they want to do. I get the feeling that, like, Naruto will probably come, like, this close to, like, fully defeating Delta. Kashin Koji will, like, interfere and sort of save her. That might be when they choose to reveal, I suppose, the mystery about, like, why Kashin Koji is sort of recognized by the Leaf Village, why his, like, energy signature, his chakra signature is allowed into the village without tripping anything. That could be a way to sort of end the fight in a more kind of plot-driven way of, like, as people suspect, maybe, like, if it's Jiraiya somehow, that would immediately, like, super shock Naruto, and it could, like, allow him to, like, be temporarily taken out in some way, or at least allow enough time for maybe, say, Kashin Koji to grab Delta and flee. Again, it depends on how powerful they want to make Delta. I think the way Kashin Koji's talking about her enough, it's kind of like, oh, she's acting recklessly. Like, the reason Kashin Koji isn't charging is because he potentially knows he's not powerful enough to face Naruto yet. Delta's rushing in herself, and he knows that's a very poor move. So they just need to get the power levels right here. They have to, I think, keep Naruto strong and not make him look like an idiot. I think they probably also need to avoid doing the sort of thing where, like, oh, they're all about scientific ninja tech. He gets hit with some ninja tech that, like, drains him of energy. I think that's the sort of stuff that they need to avoid, making these kind of the fights basically revolve around the need to take Naruto out of the fight to allow a proper fight to happen. So that's going to be tough to do. And then the other thing is that I suppose we effectively get the first interactions of, like, Delta and Kawaki. He seems sort of scared, a little bit frightened of her. He's kind of shocked to see her. And then she gives the impression that, like, she's known him at least a little bit and has kind of, like, punished him before. So, you know, it sets up the stage for, like, okay, will Boruto fight in this fight? Will Kawaki fight? And then with Himawari being there, like, will she be potentially used as kind of like a hostage that, like, just her being there is going to limit what the hero characters can do because she needs to be protected. I think it's probably important to like not forget that they are in the Leaf Village. Like, very easily, so many powerful shinobi could arrive to overwhelm the villains here in this case. I know Naruto said he'd take them on alone, but if Ino can just immediately, like, tap in to connect to him, I'm assuming that, you know, if Naruto absolutely needs to, he can just immediately, like, call for help and other characters arrive, like, you know, Sakura and so on. So, how exactly they go about, like, I suppose, resolving all of this, like, does this result in Kawaki getting taken away again? It's probably a little too soon to that. I think you need to, still further establish the connection. I think, like I maybe speculated there, like, maybe Delta gets close to being defeated, Kashin Koji steps in, that's kind of a big reveal, and suddenly we're into this kind of next stage of the story where everyone is trying to figure out the details of the Karma Mark, and it just so happens that the Leaf Village have 2 people with the Karma Mark, whereas Kara only have their leader, Jigen. So, I think that's most of what I want to say about this chapter. Like I said, I enjoyed it for what it was, but I still feel like a lot of times these monthly chapters don't have the depth of content you'd maybe expect from it being a monthly chapter. But I think they're in a really good spot. The content that they're, like, building towards, the conflict of Kara, what they're setting up with the Karma Mark, all those details are working out really well, and I think the highlight for the last couple of chapters has definitely been, like, Kawaki and Boruto's relationship, Kawaki and Naruto's relationship, Kawaki and Himawari. They're getting a lot of the character interactions really, really correct, and it makes it a fun manga to read. It's just, you know, there could be more depth, there could be a bit more going on in each chapter, but that's a pacing problem and not necessarily a problem with, like, each individual chapter. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Boruto chapter 30. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. What do you think the Momoshiki kind of connection means? What do you think they're setting up with like the same power? And what do you think, I suppose most importantly, what do you think they'll do with the fight, Delta versus Naruto? But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.